Tene tatanda Saraha Nzepe Jalbo Doha Tiala.
Within Saraha's Doha for the king, there is the presentation of ground mahamudra, of path mahamudra, and of fruition mahamudra. Of these three, we have completed the first, the presentation of ground mahamudra, and are now in the midst of the second, the presentation of path mahamudra. This has two parts: teaching one to discard attachment to mistaken paths and presenting the actual path of mahamudra. Within the first of these, teaching one to discard mistaken paths, there are 8 sections. The reason why this subject of mistaken paths is presented in so much detail is that whatever path one pursues, whether it is that of mahamudra, of sutra, of tantra, one must ensure that one is on the correct path. So, of these 8 sections in this topic, yesterday we completed the first 2, which were verses 21 and 22. Today we're going to start with the third section, which is verse 23. And this is an instruction to avoid becoming bound by minor experiences. And the analogy used to convey this instruction is the fire offering of a Brahmin. There are 2 parts to this verse: the presentation of the analogy in the first 2 lines, and the presentation of what the analogy refers to in the second 2 lines. The analogy is the performance or making of burnt offerings by a Brahmin. The meaning of the analogy, what it represents, is the incorrect practice of the path of method. In the analogy, it is the custom of Brahmins who, without having any cultivation of samadhi or performing any visualization, to make burnt offerings. And out of pride in their caste, they simply assume that by burning these substances, there will be benefit. So they burn such things as butter and rice as offerings. Now, if this type of practice of burnt offerings is accompanied by samadhi and visualization, it can be useful. But if it is just done as the mere burning of the foods, with the assumption that because one is of a certain caste, it will be effective, it is not going to lead to anything. The stuff does get burnt, but aside from that, there is no other real result. Now, this refers to the practice of the path of means or path of method without the realization of emptiness. If one practices the path of method through the power of the techniques themselves, one can indeed cause the ambrosia or drops to descend from the essence of space, or the hum syllable in one's head. And if one succeeds in doing this, one will, of course, experience physical bliss as a result. But if this is not conjoined with meditation on or realization of emptiness, this cannot possibly lead to its intended result, which is the realization of bliss emptiness. The drops will descend. You will feel very good for a while, but that's it. Nothing else will come of it, because one aspect of the practice is missing. So the point here is that the practice of the path of method without realization of emptiness is of no greater significance than simply throwing food into a fire and thinking that that is a grand offering. What is being said here is that generating authentic experience and realization is very important. Now, it's important to understand what this verse is and is not saying, and in that way avoid a possible misunderstanding of it. Our path consists of the gathering of 2 accumulations: the conceptual or referential accumulation of merit, and the non-conceptual or non-referential accumulation of wisdom. And these two accumulations assist one another. For example, in the context of the path of a bodhisattva, the first 5 of the 6 perfections, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, and meditation, I thought I forgot one, exist in order to assist and enable the development of the 6th, which is discernment. And at the same time, because they are directed toward and joined with discernment, they become pure. They become perfections. So one should not misunderstand this verse to be saying that practices that involve reference or conceptualization are to be utterly and absolutely dismissed. We do make offerings to the 3 jewels, perform generosity for the needy, maintain moral discipline, cultivate patience, and so on. And all of these practices are important branches of the conceptual accumulation of merit. So our practice does not consist only of meditation on the mind's nature in isolation from anything else. You might misunderstand this verse to be otherwise. You might think, here the great Brahmin Saraha has taught me that all conceptual practices are utterly useless. That would be a misunderstanding. These practices are by no means useless. They are very useful. But the point of these practices is the realization of mahamudra. Therefore, it was written by Shantideva in his Bodhicharyavatara, these 5 branches were taught by the Buddha for the sake of discernment. The reason the Buddha taught the practices of the first 5 perfections, generosity and so forth, was that through practicing them, one can become able to realize the 6th, which is discernment. In other words, we cultivate the conceptual accumulation of merit in order to realize mahamudra, in order to achieve the non-conceptual accumulation of wisdom. And in fact, the conscious cultivation of the conceptual accumulation of merit is necessary in order to do this. But even while it is being accumulated, this accumulation of merit must be joined with the non-conceptual accumulation of wisdom. Otherwise, as was implied in the quotation from Shantideva, in the absence of discernment, the other 5 virtues do not become paramitas or perfections because they lack discernment. So the point of this verse is, it is valuable to perform practices such as burnt offerings and the path of method, but they should always be conjoined with mahamudra experience. In the collected sutras, which is a form of the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the following analogy is presented by the Buddha. If there were many sightless people gathered together in an empty valley endeavoring to find their way to town, they would be unable to find their way, and they would wander around aimlessly. But if one person with sight were to accompany them and lead them to town, they could easily reach it. In the same way, the 5 perfections, other than discernment, on their own, are like sightless people. On their own, they can only lead to temporary benefit, temporary well-being, prosperity, and so on, but cannot lead to the achievement of awakening. But just as one person with sight can lead a large crowd of people without sight to their destination, as soon as discernment, the 6th perfection, is present and is joined with the other 5, they do become effective means for the achievement of awakening. So here, in the same way, what is being pointed out by the great Brahmin Saraha is that these practices alone, the path of method and so forth, will not lead to awakening, but that they are not useless. They merely need to be conjoined with the practice of mahamudra, which is to say with discernment or the wisdom of experience. Many of us have actually experienced this in our own practice. Many students have reported that they're very interested in the practice of meditation. They are devoted to it. They're diligent. They're really trying, but they become dissatisfied with their practice because they perceive a lack of progress. They come to me and they say, there is no improvement. The reason may be that meditation needs to be supplemented by the accumulation of merit. For example, in the context of Vajrayana practice, we always practice Guru Yoga and the performance of devoted supplication as the basis for our meditation practice. And also, with one's body, one can perform prostrations and circumambulation. With one's speech, liturgical practice and mantra repetition. With one's mind, meditation on compassion. And with one's wealth, engaging in acts of generosity. All of this will help your meditation practice progress. And because these virtuous deeds are combined with the practice of meditation, they will not just lead to some kind of temporary benefit as would normal acts of defiled virtue. So understand that in this verse, Saraha is not refuting the validity or usefulness of the path of means or the accumulation of merit. In fact, he is by implication demonstrating its validity by showing that its validity is in that it leads to, and thereby must be combined with, the realization of mahamudra. In the 24th verse, Saraha describes the incorrect practice of chandali, or tumo. And essentially, he is describing an approach to it that is more characteristic of non-Buddhist traditions. But in essence, the criticism he is making is that the physical techniques of chandali will cause, through the blazing of the fire from the abdomen, cause the drops to descend from the top of one's head. They will land on one's tongue, and then one experiences a state of great pleasure. But if this is not motivated by the wish to realize mahamudra and is not combined with the experience of mahamudra, then the experience of the pleasure of chandali alone will merely lead to a further attachment. One has created something more to which one becomes attached. And therefore, as it says in the verse, the result is the practitioner becomes thoroughly disturbed, even more disturbed or obsessed by the attachment they have developed to the experience of the practice. Not only do they become disturbed or obsessed, but they become swayed by pride because their experience is something very special to them. And therefore, thinking that they have experienced something tremendous, they call themselves yogis. But since they have no recognition or even experience of their mind's nature, they are unfit to be called yogis and have nothing to be proud of. Verse 25 addresses the topic of self-awareness. And the term self-awareness shows up in several different contexts within Buddhism. In the study of valid cognition, and in some middle way school contexts, it's said that self-awareness exists, which means that one can know what one is experiencing. Then in other contexts, such as many presentations of the middle way, it's said that self-awareness is impossible. Self-awareness would be like a sword being able to cut itself, or like a strong man being able to lift himself. But then again, in Mahamudra and similar teachings, the term self-awareness turns up again. So we seem to have three contexts for this term. The one, that of valid cognition, where essentially it seems to be a relative truth. And then the second, where it appears to be refuted as an absolute truth. And then the third, that of mahamudra, where it again turns up and is not only not refuted, but is asserted to be the highest pinnacle of the view. While this may, on first glance, seem to be a contradiction, in fact it is not. The self-awareness spoken of in valid cognition is simply the capacity that any cognition has to experience itself in the most basic sense. According to valid cognition, each of the 8 consciousnesses, such as the 5 sense consciousnesses, the mental consciousness, and the all-basis consciousness, and so forth, all have this quality or ability of self-awareness, which simply consists of the fact that a consciousness is not concealed from itself. This means, for example, that you know, without having to ask anyone else, or without having to deduce it or infer it, what has arisen in your mind, because you experience it. And that is what self-awareness means in the basic context of valid cognition. You know what you see with your eye consciousness. Now, you don't know what arises in the mind of others or what others see. You have to ask them. But you know what you see. You know what is in your mind. You neither need to ask nor infer it. This self-awareness is mundane. It is limited to the field of relative truth. It is not the self-awareness or self-aware wisdom that is spoken of in Mahamudra. Secondly, in the context of the Middle Way presentations, for example, in Chandrakirti's Guide to the Middle Way and Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, there are refutations of self-awareness. But the self-awareness that is being refuted here, that is said to be impossible, is neither the self-awareness described in the valid cognition texts, nor the self-aware wisdom that is discussed in the Mahamudra teachings. What is refuted in the Middle Way context is self-awareness in the sense of the mind being able to see itself as an object other than itself. And that is why it is refuted using analogies like the impossibility of a sword cutting itself. Now, this is very different from the self-aware wisdom of Mahamudra. The self-awareness that is refuted is one that would have a separate subject and object. The self-aware wisdom of Mahamudra is precisely that wisdom or awareness that is free of subject and object. The self-aware wisdom of Mahamudra is not the mind seeing itself as an object of perception, like a solid or substantial thing. When it's said, homage to the great mother Prajnaparamita, who is the field or the experience of self-aware wisdom, it means that self-aware wisdom is when the mind sees its own primordial freedom from existence. The mind sees its own nature, which is from the very beginning the absence of substantial existence. But because this freedom from existence is not nothingness, is not mere non-existence, because it is at the same time cognitive lucidity and therefore inherent wisdom, it can cognize, and therefore it cognizes itself. In that this nature cognizes or knows itself, it is without a viewer and viewed. And that is the self-awareness spoken of in Mahamudra. In verse 25, the situation that is described is where someone has an experience of some kind of self-awareness and thinks that it is therefore self-aware wisdom, that it is the recognition of the mind's nature, and talks of their experience to others. Now, this could be an experience of the ordinary self-awareness of relative truth, which is described in valid cognition, or it could be the misapprehension of the existence of the self-awareness which is refuted in the Middle Way School. In either case, it is not the true experience of self-aware wisdom. But thinking that being aware of your mind, experiencing your mind, is the experience of the mind's nature, making that mistake causes you to assume that this alone will liberate you. So therefore, in speaking of your experience to others, you say things like, whatever binds will liberate itself, or that itself will liberate. Now, the distinction that in this situation the practitioner is failing to make is that the self-aware wisdom described in Mahamudra is not merely the experience of the mind. It is the recognition of the mind's nature. The mere experience of the mind is the self-awareness described in valid cognition. But the recognition of the mind's nature is seeing the mind's emptiness, experiencing it, and at the same time experiencing the mind's cognitive lucidity, which cannot be separated from that emptiness. So self-aware wisdom is the wisdom of the direct experience of emptiness lucidity. That will liberate you, but merely being aware of your mind will not. So here, the analogy for the mistaking of mere self-awareness for self-aware wisdom is the mistaking of a green trinket for an emerald. What they have in common is the color, green, just as what self-awareness and self-aware wisdom have in common is self-awareness. But aside from that, there is a great difference between a trinket and an emerald. And the mistaking of the one for the other simply means that you do not know what the characteristics of an emerald are, or you would not make that mistake. So in the same way, when you mistake self-awareness for self-aware wisdom, it means that you don't know what the characteristics of self-aware wisdom are. Next comes verse 26, which is concerned with the issue of attachment to minor experiences. The analogy presented here is the analogy of mistaking brass for gold, which is pretty well identical in style or function to the previous analogy of mistaking a trinket for an emerald because of the color. One might mistake brass for gold because they have the same or similar color. Now, just as if you recognize gold as gold, it is helpful, if you mistake brass as gold, you merely become confused. In the same way, when you're practicing meditation, if you mistake a temporary or minor experience for a state of attainment, you become deceived, like someone mistaking brass for gold. Because just as brass does not have the value of gold, minor or temporary experiences do not have the value of true realization. It is normal and healthy for experiences to arise. Whether one is practicing tranquility or insight, various minor experiences will arise from time to time. But they have no great value in and of themselves. And therefore it is said, temporary experiences are like mist. They will vanish. Elsewhere it is said, If you become attached to positive experiences, such as bliss, lucidity, and non-conceptuality, you lack the view. Experiences can sometimes be very positive, like experiences of intense bliss or well-being, lucidity, and of non-conceptuality. But if you are caught by these experiences and you come to mistake the path by thinking that having gained this experience, the path consists of trying to maintain it or carry it on, then you have lost the view. Because these experiences are not the point of meditation. The point of meditation is recognition of the nature of your mind. And therefore, as it says in the second line of this verse, holding on to experiences will not help you, because you cannot accomplish the ultimate aim of meditation through attempting to maintain or carry experience with you. Also, in this verse is a second analogy for attachment to meditation experience, which is attachment to the pleasure or happiness experienced in a dream. Being attached to a specific or temporary experience in meditation is like being attached to something pleasant that you experienced in a dream. Now, when you are happy or experience pleasure in a dream, of course you are happy, you are experiencing pleasure. But it is not going to last, because the dream state is so unstable. So, in fact, we would have to say that the pleasure experienced in a dream has even less value, because it has even less stability, than the pleasure experienced in the waking state. The state of dreaming is a state of extra bewilderment. And so, what is experienced in the dream is very temporary and very unstable. It is therefore of no use to try to hold on to something that happened in a dream or appeared in a dream. In the same way, when you practice meditation, various experiences will arise. But it is important not to fixate on them or become attached to them. For example, a positive experience will occur in your meditation. Afterwards, you will reflect upon it and think, I had a good experience. By thinking of it as a good experience, you've generated the wish that it will reoccur. So then the next day you practice, it doesn't reoccur, automatically you're disappointed. There's nothing wrong with the experience. Experience is good. It's just an indication that you're practicing. But there's no necessity to try to prolong it or to hope that it will reoccur. Because aside from merely indicating that you are practicing, it has no value in and of itself. So when an experience arises, simply continue to practice meditation as you were before. And if an experience stops arising, or if experiences don't arise, simply continue to practice meditation as you were before. If you become attached to any type of meditation experience, that is a fetter. This includes experiences, visions, dreams, whatever. Don't regard these things as having any particular positive or negative value. Don't think of them as good or bad. They are just appearances within your mind. Therefore, they are not worth craving, nor is it necessary to fear them. Also, expecting such a meditation experience to last, and therefore setting yourself up for disappointment, is like, as it says in the fourth line, knowing that the skandhas are impermanent, but expecting the bliss experienced by impermanent skandhas to outlast them, to be permanent. Because the meditative state that produces the particular experience is impermanent, the experience is impermanent. In the same way, you cannot expect a state of bliss that is grounded in a certain set of aggregates to outlast those aggregates themselves. So those are our 4 verses for this afternoon, and we're therefore going to stop. But if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please go ahead.
Okay. Rinpoche, yesterday you stated that the path of methods and the path of liberation, if practiced together, are the most effective means of practicing. And I'm wondering what you meant by the path of methods in that context and why the combination is the most effective.
Well, in general, it is fine to practice the path of liberation, mahamudra, without the path of method. But what I was referring to when I said that was the path of method as it is understood in the Kagyu tradition, coming down from Talopa and Naropa down to the present day, in which context the path of liberation is defined as mahamudra and the path of method as the 6 dharmas of Naropa. However, in that context, the 6 dharmas of Naropa is the principal path of method, but it would also include the yidam practices which must precede it. Marpa, the translator, went to India 3 times, and when speaking of the dharma that he brought back to Tibet, he said, I received Hevajra, the profound tantra, and Chakrasamvara, the quintessence. By his referring to Chakrasamvara as the quintessence, it is evident that he considered Chakrasamvara the most profound of cycles of practice. And therefore, since the time of Marpa, we have taken that cycle as the basis for our practice of the path of method. In fact, it has 2 aspects. When method itself is emphasized, this deity is practiced as the father, Chakrasamvara, and when discernment is emphasized, it is practiced as the mother, Vajravarahi or Vajrayogini. Of these 2, historically, we have tended to principally emphasize as a lineage Vajravarahi. Now, the practice of Vajravarahi itself has 2 aspects. The generation stage is the Vajravarahi or Vajrayogini sadhana, and the completion stage is the practice of the 6 dharmas of Naropa. Although you can also understand that as the completion stage of both the Vajravarahi and Chakrasamvara aspects. So that is the path of method, and in the Kagyu context, the corresponding path of liberation is the practices of tranquility and insight in the context of mahamudra.
Rinpoche, a question came up in our study group, and it was told that once you reach the first bhumi, that there's no falling back, and that you reach the first bhumi when you've had experience of mahamudra, and that from that point there's like no degeneration. And what I was wondering, my experience has been like that the path is very gradual, and sometimes you click in and sometimes you click out, and sometimes you click out for a long time and then back in again. And it seemed, then I started, I started to doubt, well, did I realize anything? And then other people made it worse by saying, well, you would know if you, so I feel like it's a, my feeling is that it's a gradual thing, and I just wondered about this no in and out business, okay, if that really has anything to do with the first bhumi or what it does have to do with it. And also I thought we were supposed to keep continuing to try to prolong it, and then I got a little confused with, well, maybe you're just prolonging your experience or something. So okay, those were kind of the 2 prongs of that question. Okay. I hope it was understandable.
Where are you? I get antsy if I can't see the person. There is a difference between proceeding through the path to awakening by means of the profound path of Vajrayana or secret mantra and the vast path of a bodhisattva. For example, if we compare two individuals, both of whom achieved perfect awakening, the Buddha and Jetsun Milarepa, the Buddha, our teacher, the Samyok Sambuddha, having gathered the accumulations for 3 innumerable aeons, achieved Buddhahood. Jetsun Milarepa achieved the state of great unity, the state of Vajradhara, in 1 lifetime and 1 body. What they achieved in terms of their minds, their wisdom, what they realized is no different from one another. Whatever the Buddha saw, Milarepa saw. Whatever the Buddha abandoned, Milarepa abandoned. But because their paths were different, the way that result or fruition manifested was different. Because the Buddha achieved Buddhahood through these 3 innumerable aeons, upon achieving awakening, his body was adorned with the marks and signs, the 32 marks and 80 signs of physical perfection, his speech with the 60 limbs of melody, and his activity was both excellent and pervasive. Now, Milarepa realized the same thing that the Buddha realized, but you could say because of the difference in merit accumulated or because of the difference of path, it doesn't matter how you put it, Milarepa's body was not adorned with the 32 marks and 80 signs. He did not possess the 60 limbs of melody, nor has his activity been identical to that of Buddha Shakyamuni. The wisdom is the same, but the difference in the manifestation of the result is the difference between the manner of gathering the accumulations, or you could say the length and stability of the paths. So, to get to your question, when you see the nature of your mind, you are seeing dharmata. A first-level bodhisattva realizes dharmata. A first-level bodhisattva achieves a state beyond reversal. Those 3 things are all true, but they're all separate statements. Now put them together. Although we realize the same nature that is realized by a first-level bodhisattva on the path, on the vast path of the Mahayana, because the circumstances, means, or condition for our realizing it is different. Because we achieve this insight through what is called abrupt introduction, we do not achieve a state of irreversibility simply through a realizing dharmata. So the nature that is seen by a mahamudra practitioner is the same as the nature seen by a first-level bodhisattva on the path of the Mahayana, but the qualities that come with those insights are different. That's it.